we start the session. Okay. Now we will move on to the session. On behalf of HRF, I welcome you all for this 16 days activism against gender-based violence. Today we are conducting the 13th session. Yeah. Sorry, today we are conducting the 14th session, and today the topic of the session is reimagining access to rights. So, reimagining access to rights. Today, the entire session is co-organized by Madras School of Social Work, Chennai, Banyan Academy of Leadership in Mental Health, Chennai, Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai, Bharathidasan University, Trichy, Arunodaya Center for Street and Working Children, and Kani Nilam Organization. So today, the entire session will be moderated by Professor Damon Queen. She is a professor in Department of Social Work in Madras School of Social Work College. So welcome, Damon Queen. Over to you, Damon. Thank you, Professor.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible. You can.
All right. A very good afternoon and greetings from Madras School of Social Work. And today we'll be discussing about reimagining access to rights as a solution for gender-based violence. I would like to set a context and then we'll move on to the speakers who come as an expert in sharing about the issue. When we're talking about, gender-based violence, it's a phenomena which is deeply rooted in gender inequality. And it continues to be one of the most notable human rights violation within all society. It includes societies in the underdeveloped nation, societies in developing nation, and society in developed nation and developing nations. So gender-based violence is a violence that directly against a person because of their gender. So which means it includes men, women, and transgender. Both men and women and transgender experience gender-based violence, but majority of the victims are women and girls. This we can see from a lot of extensive research done in the area of gender-based violence. While gender-based violence and violence against women, both the term gender-based violence and violence against women are the terms that are oftenly used interchangeably, as it has been widely been acknowledged and extensive research tells that gender-based violence is inflicted on women and young girls by men. However, using the word gender-based violence or gender-based aspect, it is important as it highlights the fact that many forms of violence against women are not just by the other gender. It includes a lot of other factors like social factors, economic factors, political factors, and cultural factors. Just an example, so it could be deeply rooted in the power inequalities between men and women or access to resources and rights. Today we'll be discussing about two important aspects. One is a problem and one is a solution. The problem here we're going to highlight about gender-based violence, and the solution aspect, we're going to talk about their access to resources. So without much ado, we will listen from the speakers, and we have two panel members in our midst. I deem it a great privilege in introducing a first speaker, Dr. Virgil Desami. She's the Executive Director from Arunodaya, Chennai. Dr. Virgil is a professional social worker and have been championing for the cause of children and women's rights for nearly 4 decades with special focus on elimination of child labor, promotion of children's rights to education, and ensuring participation of children on issues concerning them with a special emphasis on girl children. Arunodaya Center for Street and Working Children was started by Dr. Virgil in 1992 with a vision of just society in which every child enjoys childhood assured of her and his rights with dignity and happiness. The organization has been instrumental in empowering communities to protect and promote child rights. In the process of community mobilization towards promoting child rights, the focus was on empowering women. Dr. Virgil initiated the formation of women's sangams, creating awareness on the rights of women and capacitating them to claim their rights. Nearly 10,000 women have been mobilized as Arunodaya Mahalir Sangam. The members are empowered to practice gender equality and navigate any form of discrimination or violence against girl child and women. and also fight against child abuse, child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and alcoholism. Dr. Virgil have been instrumental in the formation of Tamil Nadu domestic workers movement in the year 1985. Through this, we were able to get recognition. The team was able to get recognition for domestic workers as workers, the rights to form trade union and include in the welfare board and also at minimum wages. Madam, we are greatly honored to have you in our midst, and I request you to take on the session and share your thoughts on how rights to access and rights to resources and can be a solution in terms of gender-based violence. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. I congratulate HRF for taking this initiative of organizing a series of discussion during this 16 days of activism against gender violence, and really having a very energetic and fruitful discussion on various aspects of gender violence. And I'm happy to be here with you all to share from my experience from my work on issues related to reimagining access to rights as solution for gender-based violence. I think at this juncture, it is good to recall the long history of women's rights, how we were able to bring recognition to women's rights as human rights. That will really energize us and also help us to move forward. The women's rights, human rights as such, started with the UN UDHR, Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was adopted by the United Nations in 1948. So this was the first time where fundamental human rights was universally protected. That is, they said it is rights are for everyone. It set a common standard of achievement for all people and nations, and said rights are for everyone, irrespective of color, creed, sex, nation, or anything. So naturally, women enjoy these rights. Human rights are common to all human beings, and women are entitled to enjoy the same human rights and fundamental rights as other individuals, which includes the right to be free from violence and discrimination, to enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, to be educated, to own property, to vote, and to earn an equal wage. And this human rights as women's rights got really ingrained during the International Decade for Women, which was proclaimed from 1976 to 85. So during this decade, many women movements came together to enhance the rights of women. And this campaigning and lobbying and petition by nearly 500,000 women from nearly 80 countries made the United Nations World Conference on Human Rights held in 1993 to ascertain that human rights are women's rights. It is really very sad to note that though in 1948 they said human rights are for everyone, but still even after 45 years, the UN had to say that women's rights are also human rights, and they need to access all the human rights. So during this UN convention only, women's rights as human rights came up. Then another landmark in against gender violence or assuring women's rights is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which was adopted in 1981. Actually, this is termed as the International Bill of Rights for Women, and it set out a comprehensive set of rights for women in civil, political, economic, social, and cultural fields. And it also defined what we mean by the discrimination against women. And this convention also has a protocol to it, optional protocol, which provides for any individuals or groups to place a complaint if there is any discrimination or violence against women. But unfortunately, our country, India, is yet to sign this optional protocol. Then another landmark in the women's rights in kind of gaining recognition to women's rights as human rights is the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, which was held in 1995. And during this time, nearly 30,000 women from nearly 189 nations participated in it. And they came out with a historic blueprint, which is called as the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Plan of Action. So this Beijing Platform for Action imagined a world where every woman and girl can exercise her freedom and choices and realize her rights, so as to live free from violence, to go to school, to participate in decisions, and to earn equal pay for work of equal value. And this was the first time that girl children also got included. When talking about women's rights, it was mostly talked about women's rights as such. But during this World Conference in Beijing, they included girls as a specific group on whom we need to concentrate. And it is also during this conference that the slogan "Women's rights are human rights," and the human rights are women's rights gained significance. From then on only, we started really not talking about this issue. And all these actions, like starting from 1948 and especially the Fourth World Conference of Women in Beijing, led to the Sustainable Development Goals having specific focus on women. SDG 5 talks about gender equality, and this goal is more broad-based, and it targets at ending gender-based violence, eliminating child marriage and female genital mutilation, ensuring access to sexual and reproductive health. And it also includes equal access to education, expanding women's economic opportunities, and reducing the burden of unpaid care work on women and girls. Because no one talked about this unpaid care, unpaid care work by women. And now after this Fourth World Conference, only there was a lot of discussion on the unpaid care work by women, getting recognition to it. So surely the Beijing Platform for Action had an influence on this SDG goal, in making specific reference to ending gender inequality. Back home in India, when you look at the constitution, the framers of a constitution did have this in the background, and they provided for equality, equal rights to all, including women, when they say that fundamental right to equality before law, that is equal protection of law in India, is assured through Article 14. And equality of opportunity in matters of public employment is ensured in our constitution. And it says that all kind of discrimination should be prohibited, whether it is on ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And it also provides for making special provision for women and children. And of course, all the other rights, as they say, the fundamental rights are universal. Everyone is equal before the law. So all the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution are also applicable to women. Especially, it also talks about the political rights. That women reservation is there. That women also have the right to take part in the politics, to be members of the political parties or to get elected. And there are nearly 11 legislations to provide legal protection for women. So all these things are there. So many women. One second. What's happening? So many women and women rights movements waged a battle, and we were able to really get recognition to women's rights as women's rights are also human rights through different convention and action plans. But where do we stand now? Even after 25 years of this Beijing platform for action, day in and day out, we are witnessing gender violence, gender inequality, violation and denial of rights to women. When you say gender violence is not just physical or verbal or emotional abuse of women, but when women are denied their rights, when they are not able to access their rights, it is a violence against them. Many times, many people, even the society, fail to see it. No, only when someone is beaten or something like that, they say it is considered as gender violence. But the very fact that women cannot participate in decisions that affect their lives, and they are denied political participation and a fair representation in politics, and when they are prevented from going to school or receiving proper health care, when they face discrimination in employment, when they are denied equal rights to own land and property, when they suffer from violence within their homes, and when they are subjected to harmful traditional practices, all this amounts to gender violence. So we are experiencing this, we are witnessing it every day, it's happening. And now, in the present situation, with this COVID-19, we see the situation really escalating. The inequality, discrimination, lack of access to rights, rights violation is more on the increase during this, especially during the lockdown time, because many women, especially the single women and women-headed households, were very much affected due to the lockdown. They were not able to take up any job. The source of income was affected. They had no money to feed their children, to run the family. And at the same time, the violence against women was also on the increase. Physical violence against women also increased. Of course, during the lockdown time, all the Tasma shops were closed. And some were happy that their husbands were not drinking. Children also said, my father is not drinking now, he is playing with me. But in majority of cases, somehow liquor was available to them, though the shops were closed, and it was available at a higher rate. And after a few months, they started opening the shops in the neighboring districts like Chengalpattu and Tiruvallur. So they were getting it from there, and these men from Chennai were buying it at a higher rate. And for this, where do they get the money? No, they get it from the women. Whatever savings they had, whatever money they had, they were taking it up. And during one of our meetings, one of our child was sharing that in their family, a mother was cooking with the gas cylinder in the gas stove. And father came and just took the cylinder away, just to sell it and buy liquor. So this kind of lot of violence against women also increased, and it is continuing, economically, physically, mentally. And we also had faced instances where some of the women during the lockdown times were contemplating suicides also because of the pressure, economic pressure and social pressure. And some of the women who contracted corona were tested positive. They were very much discriminated. They were not given job. Even now, some of them are not able to take up job because that kind of stigma is attached to them. And once the mother was taken away, no arrangement was made to take care of the children. Children were just left like that. So these kind of difficult situation were faced by women. And during this lockdown time, access to healthcare was very much denied, especially pregnant women were sharing, because they usually take their go for test and immunization in the primary health center. But during this time, they say primary health center will not cater to them, will not provide the services. So they had to, like in North Chennai, they had to go to the RSRM hospital, where it was crowded, and they were facing a lot of difficulties, and they were asked to take corona test, which was not done in that hospital. They had to go somewhere else. So during this time, one of our one of our women group member also had a miscarriage, because of all this difficulties. So this corona, COVID, and the lockdown has escalated, the violence against women and kind of discrimination against women. So when you look at this, some women may be experiencing and enjoying the fundamental rights, but how do we take it? When a woman is enjoying a fundamental right, for example, if I am able to be born alive, the woman has to thank her parents because they did not kill her in the womb or as an infant. Feticide or infanticide was not done. And when the girl is able to go to school, study and go for higher education, she has to thank her parents for allowing her to study. And more importantly, when the girl gets married and when she is able to pursue her career after marriage, she has to immensely thank her husband, saying that my husband allowed me to take up the career, my in-laws are helping me. This we have seen, many women saying. But have you ever seen a man saying, oh, I'm able to go for work because my wife allowed me? So this is a thing, we take it for granted that, men are free to do and women do not have that freedom and access to this kind of free movements. So here we see basic social structure, the systems, the mindset, which is fueled by the media also, really perpetuates this denial of rights to women, not giving them access to rights, violation of rights of women. Even if you look at the effort or the actions taken by government to eliminate gender-based violence, it is more based on situations, responding to something that happened, and it's a kind of meeting the needs of the survivor. Even if you look at the schemes of the government, it all revolves around the marriage. Marriage benefit schemes are there, Tali Kitangam, those kind of schemes are there. So it is like saying, putting women into one particular kind of box, because our antenna is kind of glued to that, to this kind of gender stereotyping, where men are seen as agentic, that they are strong, they can take the leadership, they are the ones to take decisions. But women are more communal. They have to be within the community, take care of community, building relationship, being docile. So this kind of a gender stereotype, the first victim of this gender stereotype is the girls' self-esteem, the ambition of girls, the expectations of the girls. These become the first victim of this gender stereotyping, where they are not able to look beyond this kind of box. And we find this gender stereotyping being fueled, being ingrained again and again through our cultural norms and traditions and customs, which keeps the women reinforcing this kind of stereotype. For example, the preference for sons, which is leading to feticide and infanticide, because we say that only the son can lit the fire at the funeral, and girls are to be sent away to another home. So it is good to have boys. This kind of mindset, the traditional attitude, and this leads to child marriage and the practice of giving dowry. So practice of giving dowry really makes the women not able to access the right to property, because the family says, the parents or the brothers says, yes, we have given you dowry, we have given you so much of amount. So why should we give a right to property to you? So this kind of lot of this traditions and cultural norms it really incites the violence against women. Violence against women, when I say it's not just the physical violence, but not able to access their rights, denial of rights to women. And these cultural norms and traditions are sanctioned by dominant ideologies. Religion also sanctions this, that women's place is here. For example, Devadasi system is under the garb of the religion. So there's some of the religious practices or dominant ideologies. It sanctions this traditional customs and cultural norms, which perpetuates gender violence. And in the present times, we see the state also coming up very heavily against women. For example, when I say state, the people who are in the leadership, their views on child marriage. We had a discussion with one of the person who was standing for election to MP in Chennai. So when we were discussing about child marriage, he was of the opinion that it is good to marry the children at an early age. It is better for them. So this, and also we had views from some of the leaders saying that parental consent should be obtained for marriage by women, even if they are above 20, 21 years. If they want to marry, they should get the consent of the parents. If it is without the consent of the parents, the marriage should be declared as null and void. And justifying marital rape. We had so many ministers and leaders saying that marital rape is not to be considered as rape. And now we are hearing a lot about this Manu Nidhi, Manu laws, which says that women have to be down always in the protection of father, husband, brothers, husband, and then son. So these are being kind of, it's really very sad, that though we talk about so much of development, women are in all the places, but still, somehow I have a fear that we are going back, going back by many decades also, because of this traditions and customs being brought up again. This kind of violence against women is being justified in the name of tolerance and respect towards culture. And culture is often used as an excuse to justify the violation of rights, the violation of gender rights. And added to this is the media, the advertisements, the kind of TV shows that come up, the film, or even the news. What kind of news do they give? So all this really keeps perpetuating gender violence, I would say. For example, in media, all of you would have seen, when there is an advertisement by banks for savings, how do they project, like, boy means he will be having that convocation cap, saying about education. Girl will be decked up in a pattu sari with all the jewels as a bride. So the message given is you have to save for the education of the son and marriage for the daughter. So the whole, what do you say, the culture, the societal, mental setup is always geared towards this. And media plays a very major role in kind of reinforcing this kind of attitude, this kind of gender stereotype messages getting ingrained into the minds of the society. I won't say it's only the men, but even the women. Women are kind of drawn into this. And many may say women are only against women, but it is not that, because women are drawn into this without the knowledge because of the influence of media. And this kind of stereotyping, the cultural norms lead to a lot of discrimination and inequality among women and girls. For example, the greatest inequality we can see from a sex ratio. Every time the census comes, we talk about this number of women going down. Of course, in the last census, there was a slight increase in the number of females to male. But the child sex ratio, 0 to 6 years, came down heavily. Like for example, in 2001 census, it was 927, 0 to 6 years, and 2011 it came down to 919. This is the national number. But when you go into states, certain states, it was less than 900, and even certain districts in Tamil Nadu also, it was very venturing factor or sex ratio at birth. No, when a child is being born, as per biological thing, it's told that for every 1,000 males there should be 950 females. That is the normal thing that should be happening. But in 2011 census, it was only in 2001 it was 906, and it came to 899 in 2018. So 2011 it was 906, and 2018 in a survey it has come down to 899. That is the child sex ratio at birth. When a child is born, whether it is a boy or a girl. So this shows that a lot of feticide is happening when you are able to diagnose whether it's a boy or a girl. If it is a girl, abortion is done. The fetus is removed. So though there are a lot of PNDT Act is there, lot of regulations are there, but in spite of it, this is happening, and we find the number going down every year. We should see what is coming up in 2021. I don't know whether the census will be done in 21, but I'm sure the number will be much lesser, the child sex ratio at birth. So a lot of technology. When you say earlier it was the infants were killed, murdered, but now the fetus itself is killed so that they are not allowed to be born also. And second is the access to right to education. All of us know, you see when you look at the numbers of children being enrolled, especially in Tamil Nadu, girls' enrollment is higher. And when you look at the results, the public exam results of 10th and 12th standard, you'll find more girls, the percentage of pass is more among the girls. But how many of them go in for higher education or college? I have seen many girls in our area where they score more than 1,000. That time it was 1,200. More than 80%, 90%, but not allowed to pursue their college education, higher education, because the parents say college is not nearby. They have to travel by bus or something like that, and the parents are afraid. What will happen to my daughter if I send her so far? Something may happen. She may go astray, or she may fall in love. These kind of apprehensions are there. And also another thing is that if she gets married, if she gets educated, will she get a proper maple for her bridegroom? It may be difficult to get her married. So it's better that I marry her off now. So most of these girls, though they get enrolled, many of them do complete their high school, but going in for higher education remains a very big girls and boys on this issue of this online. We had a debate among the girls and boys on how they are being discriminated. So many of the girls were saying, suppose if your phone is available, mobile phone is available online, the first preference is given only to the boys. They are only allowed to attend these online classes. Girls are not allowed to attend these classes. And even going to school or getting books and all these things, the girls are discriminated against. Education, they think it's not needed for the girls. Again, going back to our culture, norms, traditional practices, and the media influence, which shows that girls are born to get married, going to the in-laws' place, bear children. So that is what is considered as the role of women in the society. When that is considered, what is the use of education? That is the argument put forth by this people and discriminating against this women and girls. So the right to take decisions. Are they able to take the decisions? In our area where we work, mostly the women are the earning member in the family. Father may earn, but spends it on alcohol, doesn't contribute to the economy of the family. But it's the women who contribute to the economy of the family. But when it comes to the question of education of the child, especially the marriage of children, who takes the decisions? No, the mother is not permitted to take the decision. The decision is on the part of the men. Now, I have been saddened to see in many instances where the man would have absconded, like he would have deserted the family and gone away somewhere, or he might have married another woman. But when at the time of marriage, not taking decision, marriage of the children, taking decisions or taking the lead, I have seen women going back to that man and begging him to come and just stand there during the wedding ceremonies and take the lead in organizing the wedding. So this kind of discrimination is there, that women are not able to take decisions in their lives, to speak loudly. And the political representation. Of course, reservation is there. And now more and more women are getting elected, especially in the panchayat. But what happens to them? Now, recently we saw during the Independence Day program where a woman panchayat leader was not allowed to hoist the flag, hoist the national flag. And they were made to sit down on the floor by the others. And recently through HRF only, when we had this SDG webinars, one of the women member was was being interviewed during one of those webinars. And we found that only her husband was answering all the questions, because that particular locality was given for as women constituency. She stood and got elected. But the man never allowed her to speak. I remember even the facilitators were saying, let her speak. But he only kept on speaking. So that is the kind of situation. Even if women get elected, even when they get political rights, how far they are able to exercise this right is a big question mark. So to come out of this kind of a situation, I say access to rights of being free of gender-based violence, and really enjoying the rights. I think more girls and women need to be aware of these issues. Like we find that many women, simple thing as after 6 o'clock, the police should not come and call the women to the police station. But still we see, the police coming at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock also, coming to the house and taking the women, and only women police should be there. These are all simple things which should be known, but many women are not aware of it, and even if they are aware, maybe they are scared of asking or questioning them. And the education of women. When I say education, it's not just going to school and getting educated, because our education system is also very, very discriminatory. How far it is helpful for the girls? No, you don't have, the girls' needs are not taken care of. The toilet facilities, or how the girls could feel comfortable in the schools. But when you say education, it should be the education of life skill education, wherein they are able to take decisions, they get to know about themselves, they are able to take control of their life, have economic independency and emotional independent, not being dependent on others emotionally and economically, always thinking that the other people, are the men or the others, are very good enough to allow them to live or allow them to study or allow them to work, but being more emotionally independent. So this kind of capacity building or awareness, development, creating a situation is very, very essential. And when you talk about gender-based violence, accessing rights, it's not only talking to girls. We need to talk with boys and men. And at Arunodaya, we took this initiative of working with boys 2 years back. We targeted 100, but we could reach 25. We had special sessions with them, and the results have been amazing. We can find a remarkable change in the attitude of the boys. Initially, when we started, even an 8-year-old boy will say, no, girls have to be like this only. They should not be not given freedom. They should get married earlier. They should only do all the work at home. So these kind of attitudes are very, very deeply ingrained among boys and men. So to make them come out of it is very, very, very essential. Because when you talk about women's rights, it's not only working with women. No, we need to work with the boys. We need to work with the men. We need to work in the society so that the societal setup has to be changed to accept women as human beings. No, we coined the slogan long back, no, that women's rights are human rights are women's rights. But has it really become practical? Is it being exercised? That no remains a big question mark. And suppose if, against all this, if a woman really comes out, is emancipated, what are the challenges that we face? We have been seeing, when a woman really comes out, when she is able to voice out her opinion, she gets educated, she becomes economically independent. Is she allowed to be independent? We hear cases of where such women have been raped, how the society looks at them. If a widow gets remarried, how does it look? Recently, one school teacher, he lost her wife. It's not even 4 months. No, he is looking for another girl to get married, for a remarriage. But for a widow, will the society accept it? Even now, it is not accepting. And pushing women to the margin, even to the extent of committing suicide. We have seen so many cases of women who were able to take leadership, who came out, were pushed down, have been raped, have been murdered, or pushed to the extent of committing suicide. So what we need to see is that there is a need for developing a support system, wherein these women will be supported. It's not that an individual woman is there. Winning rights for women is not just individual, but we had to look at the whole community, where the community will be strengthened. Both boys, girls, men, women, transgender, all the people should be strengthened, have that kind of mental setup to accept this women's rights as human rights. So how we are going to move towards this? So there is a need to work on the media when this kind of advertisement come up, whether we are able to raise our voice against it, and the government schemes, whether it is not discriminating against women, the policies of the government, and women's solidarity is very, very essential. So if we all work together on this, I'm sure we can achieve a gender-based violence-free society wherein the women will be able to access their rights. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your expertise in that area of women's rights. And to conclude, to briefly about what you have shared, I think you have set a context about the global agenda of human rights, how initially the UN started with human rights for all, setting a context that rights has to be protected invariably of uh, gender, and how the movement, even movements have been intensified later, and then the human rights for all has been included as women's rights as human rights, especially setting a context for CEDAW document, and how the paradigm shift taken from CEDAW to Beijing conference, how the women's rights has been adding in another arena of girls' rights, especially focusing on education and girls' children's participation. And it was pretty interesting that you have highlighted about the gender-based violence. It's not about what happens as a violence to women. It's also about what doesn't happen to her if she deserves it. Say, for instance, gender-based violence, it does not only include, from your talk, you said, not only the child marriage or dowry or trafficking or any cultural system like Devdasi system or abuses or intimate partner violence. It is not only this component of gender-based violence, the denial of access to rights, the denial of access to education, the denial of access to intellectual rights, properties, decision making. These also includes the component of violence based for women. That's a bit beautifully said by you, ma'am. And especially you're touching about the concept of how COVID has become another area that inflicting a lot of violence for women, and then they did not have any platform to access to resources. And lastly, that you have highlighted about how the systems, societies, and mindset, and especially the media and the culture, has played an important role in limiting the access to women and also inflicting more violence based on gender. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, ma'am. Without much ado, we're going to the next speaker. And in our midst, we have speaker, Ms. Radhika Ganesh, and she's a founder, member for Ek Kvatle Redki, which is Kani Nilam in Tamil. And Ms. Radhika Ganesh is a socio-cultural political activist with over 8 years experience working in the grassroots in India on various right-based issues. Born and raised in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, Ms. Radhika completed her college education in London, UK. As an young graduate back in India, she began working with cotton farmers and mobilized young people from various farming communities to join the fight against corruption and vested interest in the state establishment. With an urge to learn, she moved to Rajasthan in 2012 and joined the Masundar Kisan Shakti Shangdan under the guidance of a mentor, Ms. Aruna Roy, Nikhil Dev, and Shankara Singh. She is part of various national movements to work with cultural identities and to need to expand people's political action and advocacy to preserve diversity and identity. Excising our experience in right based work, Ms. Radhika and her colleagues are committed in running two small community libraries and experiencing learning center for children from the marginal sections of Rajasthan. She spearheads several advocacy efforts for policy interventions into various issues at the district, state, and national level. Last year, she convened Young People for Policies, a unique forum to develop working system that facilitates positive generational influx into Indian polity. Her profile is mammoth. I'm just given a glimpse about the profile. And with these rich, extensive expertise, I now request Ms. Radhika Ganesh to share her valuable thought on how rights to access and rights to resources can be a solution to address the issue of gender-based violence. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Professor Deben, for that introduction. Vanakkam, Jai Bhim, Jai Savitri, Zindabad to all of you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see my screen? Hopefully you are. So I had a bunch of things prepared that I wanted to put out there, but my previous speaker, Dr. Virgil, has eloquently covered several topics. So I think I'm going to try and modify as I go. And the first thing I want to put out there is I come from a space where I learned everything I know from people in the grassroots. My learnings come from observations. And today, whatever I'm going to put out there are just those learnings. And how voices from the margins can teach us to sort of utilize rights in very innovative ways, access rights in very innovative ways, and address issues even as serious as gender-based violence. Just one second. Yeah. So the first thing is that gender-based violence, or any violence per se, does not happen in isolation. Gender is not an isolated concept, especially in a country like India, actually world over, but especially in a country like India. Violence is always at the intersection of multiple identities. And today I would like to speak to you, since we are reimagining rights, I would like to speak to you about violence in the intersection of gender, caste, and poverty. I have a lot of photographs and case studies that I want to, sort of touch upon. Most of these are works of our collectives. Ek Potli Retki, in Tamil, we are called Kani Nilam. And Kani Nilam works mostly in Kadalur district of Tamil Nadu, as well as the coastal districts with fishing communities, and in other states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Okay, when we say violence, as I've already mentioned, we are at an intersection of multiple identities, right? And violence does not necessarily have to always be explicit. I think over the past several days, you've heard many speakers, many excellent speakers, including my previous speaker, who spoke about how violence does not have to be, getting molested or getting beaten or physically being violated, right? Violence can also be very implicit in the sense it's inherent to certain cultures. It's inherent as women, as minority genders. There is a certain inherent oppression and violence that comes with our identity. And there are some stats that I want to put here, but these numbers are constantly shifting and moving up and down. We must keep that in mind, mostly moving up. That's what I want to say. India ranks 127th on the Gender Inequality Index, the UNDP notes, and 108th in the Global Gender Gap Report. Women occupy very little of the public space in India. At its best today, women's share of seats in the Indian parliament is only 14%. Every third woman above the age of 15 in India has faced gender-based violence of some kind. Of the women who experienced violence since the age of 15, 83% reported that their current husbands were abusive. Surprisingly, only 14% of women who face spousal violence sought help to stop it. And most of the women were in support of this sort of culture of domestic violence. Girl children face significant risk to life because of their gender. 2 lakh girls under the age of 5 are killed in India due to gender-based discrimination. So all of these numbers set an extremely morbid stage for our talk. However, going forward, I want to also focus on some of the positives. In India, as I said before, there are these sort of stark statistics, but we are also a country that has committed to gender equality by 2030 as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 5 is gender equality by 2030. We have 16 laws only on violence against women, but these laws are written in gendered languages. These laws are drafted within the system of patriarchy, so not necessarily addressing violence from a woman's perspective. And in 2013, a fund worth more than $100 million was set up as part of gender-based violence, addressing gender-based violence in India. Sort of the main contributing factor to this dissonance between policy, political will, and lived experience of people is the overarching sort of culture of patriarchy within which these legislations and programs are developed. As you know, for instance, if you as Dr. Virgil said, this Tangam for Tali, or whether you see Totil Kurandai schemes, these are all schemes that are supposedly meant to empower or emancipate women, but because they are so strongly sort of rooted in the idea of patriarchy itself, they don't necessarily do anything to address violence. Okay, so women and girls are disproportionately represented in all forms of marginalization, but often fall behind within development initiatives because social culture prevents their access and representation. Our collective aims to work at these intersections to create a culture of equal access, accessibility, and representation of women. So if you guys want to know more, that's our blog and you can read about it. I'm going to narrate a series of stories that has helped Ekpotli Retki Karni Nilam to evolve its access to rights programs and interventions. I'm also going to talk to you about some personal stories that have affected me in my life in a positive way to understand how we can reimagine access to rights as a very effective tool to address gender-based violence. I'm presuming because it's such a long program, so many days, so many speakers have already addressed what are the kinds of gender-based violence. I'm not going into those details. Kadalur, for those of you who don't know, is about 200 kilometers from Chennai. It's a sea town. It's a very historic town. and Kadalur, the district, is at the center of the three intersectional identities that I was initially talking about: gender, caste, and poverty. So just to quickly give you an idea as to how we are looking, why we are looking at Kadalur as such an important example. As you can see, Kadalur is a coastal town, and it has, over the past 8 years, has had some of the worst caste and gender related indicators in Tamil Nadu. It's quite surprising because those of us who grew up in Tamil Nadu usually tend to believe that either Western Tamil Nadu or South Tamil Nadu is a lot more casteist or is a lot more sort of patriarchal. But there is a reason as to why a district like Kadalur, that is seemingly very, it doesn't necessarily come up in a lot of conversations about development. It's usually sort of sidelined only when there is disaster, people talk about Kadalur, things like that. The district literacy rate is lower than the state average. It's at 73.4. The district records highest gender literacy gap, 15.8 in the entire state. And one of the most shocking things I learned about Kadalur when I went there is that in the entire global south between 2016 and 18, Kadalur ranked as one of the lowest child sex ratios in the global south, not in India, not in Tamil Nadu, in the global south. It had 896 to every 1,000 boys, 896 girl children to every 1,000 boy children. And as my previous speaker talked about, this is sort of a primary indicator to how violent a society or a community is towards its girl children. There is a reason as to why there is such a large gap in addressing gender issues or developing gender issues in a community. As I said, in that intersection of caste, poverty, and gender, we must understand how certain culture and social practices permeate into society to perpetuate violent sort of systems on women. Female feticide practices spread from Western states like Salem, Western districts like Salem and Dharmapuri, to Eastern districts like Kadalur, Ariyalur, and Perambalur. Many families willfully decide to remove the female fetus in a quest for sons. And this is one of the ways to understand why we are talking about intersectional identities. This sort of a drive to want to get rid of female fetuses is a very caste entrenched practice. And as you can see in my diagram here, the green districts are districts that are far more economically stable, have a sort of more agrarian land and access, have more resources, and have more per capita income. The practices there, these sort of oppressive caste and gender practices, have permeated from those districts all the way to districts that are poor, that don't have agrarian stability, that don't have other occupational stability, like Kadalur, Ariyalur, and Perambalur. In fact, Ariyalur is the poorest district in Tamil Nadu as of today. So this transference of violent practices of all kinds, caste and gender, is because there is an aspirational quality when it comes to society. People in society want to constantly move upward, and this upward mobility is attached to practices that somebody immediately above you does. So mostly in India, feticide, dowry, all of these sati, punishment rape, these were all practices initially started and practiced by dominant caste groups. And today, because castes that have been oppressed and in the margins want to become like dominant castes or want to become like their rich, economically stable counterparts, are adapting these practices as a upward mobility, social upward mobility. So this is the sort of background in which our collective is working. And I also have some data here. 31% highest urban poverty rate in the entire state is in Kadalur. Second highest rural poverty state in the state is also Kadalur. So it's poor, it's heavily casteist, and it's highly gender biased. Our collective, as I mentioned, has designed interventions which aim at creating cultural and political shifts within the intersections of caste, gender, poverty at Kadalur by actioning rights. So today we are talking about reimagining rights. One of the main elements of reimagining rights is to be able to not just imagine it, but to take that sort of innovative approach to rights and action them, right? This model is an extension of our work in states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And I'd like to place before you a few case studies from other states and then bring you back to Kadalur. So my first case study is about one of my mentors, my greatest inspiration, and an indomitable woman in my life who has inspired me. Her name is Norati Bai. Norati Bai today must be about 70 to 73 years old. When I did the case study, she was a little younger. Norati Bai is from a village called Harmada in Rajasthan. I met her when I was part of the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, and she's one of the leaders of the MKSS. And Norati Bai comes from a Dalit community called Regar. The community is basically traditional leather working community, and we all know how heavily stigmatized that particular group or section of people are. She is completely illiterate. She's never been to school, but Norati Bai is one of the most incredible community leaders I have ever met in my life. She led the minimum wage struggle for women in India. It was her case in the courts that won the minimum wage case for women. So during drought work in 1980s, she was part of the Bhavri Devi anti-rape campaign. She was part of the anti-sati campaign. She, in her 65th year, became a Sarpanch village head, Gram Panchayat head. She got elected by spending only 600 rupees on her election. She's a UN speaker. She's all of these things. Today, without ever going to school, she has learned computer. She's teaching young women how to access their computer. And her panchayat during her sort of engagement became the best panchayat in India. She won awards and things like that. So learning from somebody like Norati Bai, I have come to understand that one of the critical ways of actioning rights is through the power of the collective. Norati Bai has spent her life building these collectives. Women in the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, whether it's in Tilonia or elsewhere, under the leadership of Norati Bai, have constantly sort of come together to access their rights as a collective. It's very difficult to fight such a large fight as individuals. So the power of the collective is something that we learned from her. Moving on. The second case study I want to put forth to you is that of Vimla Kumari. Vimla Kumari today must be about 17 or 18 years old. She was a class 11 student when I first met her in Bhim in Rajasthan. She's a daughter of a widow, and her mother was a daily wage worker who earned 100 rupees a day in the Narega work sites. And she traveled 20 kilometers a day by bus to get to her school. And she was among 700 girl students who had to repeat class 11 multiple times because they didn't have enough teachers to teach them the subjects they needed to graduate high school. She became a student leader who led the agitation that resulted in appointment of school teachers. So we ran an entire campaign called Shiksha Ka Sawal, where young women, young girls like Vimla Kumari understood that actioning of their right through the power of resistance. So as you can see, these girls decided that occupying streets for demanding to keep their demand for teachers in their schools was a very important way of addressing the violence of inequality that was being perpetrated on them. In Bhim, there is a boys' school and a girls' school. The boys' school had labs, computer science teacher. Every teacher position was filled. they had toilets, they had water supply, whereas the girls' school was dilapidated, did not have doors or roofs in the toilet, and had almost 17 teacher positions vacant. And until Vimla, the day Vimla and her friends came out to the streets, they hadn't had a principal in the school for more than 9 years. And this is a quote that has stuck with me. She said, "Why does my school have less teachers and facilities? Is it because I am a girl? Did Gandhiji not teach us that education is an equal and fundamental right?" This is how young Vimla and her friends asserted their rights and actioned right through resistance. So their reimagining of a right to education, was not just about the fact that they could go to a school. It goes beyond just the primary fundamentals of going to school, but being able to utilize the school and the system of education completely. So coming back to Kadalur, learning from like Vimla, like Nortibai, like my guru, Aruna Roy. I have many inspiring women who've given us a lot in our sort of learning process. And Kani Nilam is taking these learnings and putting it to use in Kadalur. So we've already seen the backdrop in which we are working. And I'm going to talk to you about two very specific sort of interventions we are able to action today in Kadalur. The first one is changing cultural memory. We must understand that cultural memory plays a very critical role in perpetrating any kind of violence, especially gender-based violence. Caste and patriarchy go hand in hand as far as women are concerned. And in that sense, we must try to constantly tap at this cultural memory that teaches our society, or that reiterates to our society, that women have to be treated a certain way. So towards that, we are identifying gender socialization norms in public spaces, or semi-public spaces. It could be anywhere that children have access to, everything from school campuses to bus stands to government offices. And we are also looking at key indicators of life and livelihood, language, methods of association, cultural practices, kovilku poradhu, enna madri udaigal podranga. Everything is part of this cultural memory. And through this, we are observing and understanding gender behavior, right? Through various institutional mechanisms, art, entertainment, digital media, manufacture, and we are manufacturing a culture that will rethink these norms on gender and its association with caste and poverty. What is very important in this process is the consistent sort of engagement of young children themselves in the process. So we as civil society cannot individually, as independent entities, reimagine rights for the margins. It has to be a co-creative process. It has to be a process where they lead and we follow. And in that sense, in Kadalur, most of our work are led by young women and men. And largely, we have also been able to absorb that gender-based violence requires a great deal of participation and cooperation from the dominant gender and dominant caste as well. If you don't have that participation, then we are placing the onus or the burden of resistance squarely only on the oppressed. So if we are constantly telling women that this is your right, get up and assert it, but we are not telling men that this is not your space, move away, then we are doing a great disservice to our own movement by placing squarely the entire burden of it on our shoulders. So identifying indicators that can be used to shift these norms within various spaces. Once we identify them, we move towards addressing them with the sort of help of many civil society tools like advocacy, like policy dialogue. We do a lot of capacity building with young people. Then the next step towards this is shifting social norms. In partnership with local government schools, we arrange for children to visit and familiarize themselves with council offices, police stations, panchayat offices. Why is this important? Because these are spaces where gender-based violence is consistently perpetrated. Even today, I was complaining, I've been dealing with a case for several weeks now, actually for several years now. And over the past 2 weeks, I've been part of this sort of larger group of people who are back and forth giving information. And I was expecting something to come to me last night. And then I realized the bureaucrat who was supposed to send it to me chose to send it to a male colleague. The information was pertaining to me. I am the one leading the case, but he chose to send it to a male colleague just because he's male, right? So whether it's the bureaucracy, whether it's the police, whether it's this, any part of the system is part of the society. And society, because of our cultural memory, is inherently biased and unequal to women. So in order to sort of facilitate this, slow drip irrigation kind of a mentality change in the system, as well as help children understand how important it is to constantly access their rights, we take them to all these spaces. We are running programs for older children from these communities to take on volunteer roles to assist access to these institutions. So it's not just young children, but it's also everybody in the society has to participate in reimagining these rights, right? It's not like you can say, oh, this is something that only children have to do, or this is something only women have to do. Let them do it. We ensure that every activity that we are doing has at least 50% girl children participation, or girls occupy leadership positions. So whether it's the collective, whether it's a society group, whether it's a peace committee that we are forming. So these are conscious ways of reimagining and actioning rights. We work towards normalizing women leadership. I think this is very, very important. As I said, people are not used to seeing women as leaders. We network with other formal and informal local groups to provide women decision-making spaces and power. Okay, so coming to a sort of a very critical question. How to access rights when violence is a question? Today, we are constantly sort of battling with data that is thrown at us that shows us that as a society, we are constantly regressing rather than progressing. It took 45 years for the world to recognize, as Dr. Virgil said, the world to recognize women's rights as human rights. Today, we are in a space and time where politically and socially, our country is regressing towards developing laws, systems, social vigilantism, towards policing women further, towards reducing our rights. They are passing love jihad laws, whereas 3 national committees set up by the same government has come out and said there is absolutely nothing called love jihad. So we are constantly regressing in our approach and in our day-to-day existence as an equal society. We are regressing, right? We are not an equal society. So in that sense, when we face violence of various kinds on a day-to-day basis, how to access rights? How do we do it? And the only way to do this is by reimagining them. And I think that's where the stories that I have narrated to you so far, hopefully come as some sort of holds up a mirror to all of us, whether it's voices from the margins or whether it's intellectual voices that have spoken in conferences like this over the past several days. All of our voices have to sort of come to a confluence where we agree that the Constitution of India has put aside certain provisions that say these are rights. But the system is so heavily biased that it's constantly denying women their rightful place, whether it's in politics, whether it's in society, or whether it's economic progress. In that sense, reimagining rights begins with collectivizing, mobilizing. It moves on to understanding or sort of deconstructing these rights. And while we deconstruct this right, I think it's very important to understand how rights are, or rights and entitlements are different, and how we can action these both. Right is fundamental, it's constitutional, and it is ideological. Whereas an entitlement is something that is actionable. Most of us in civil society know very well that getting access to these entitlements is sort of the bottom line to be able to even start scratching the surface of inequality, whether it's in gender, whether it's in caste, or whether it's economy. In this sort of intersectional space, we have been able to also do one more thing, which is capture something that is very, very key to addressing violence in today's world, which is fighting violence in the virtual world. So there has been a lot of data over the past couple of years that has shown to us that the online space is increasingly violent to gender minorities. And in that sense, we must expand the scope of our rights-based work to the virtual world as well. This is something that our collective thought of in 2019, and that's how we ended up starting Young People for Politics. To be able to bridge the largest violence. For instance, if you see what happened during COVID, right? All of us here today are sitting comfortably in our homes, talking to each other about such an important sort of a topic through an online forum. Mukavasi English la dhaan pesrom. So this itself is slightly violent in the sense this is inaccessible to most of the women in India. So நம்ம பேசுற விஷயங்கள் அவங்கள பத்தி பேசுறோம், அவங்களுக்கான விஷயங்களை பேசுறோம், ஆனா அவங்களால இதை கேட்கவோ பார்க்கவோ எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் பண்ணவோ முடியாது. In that sense, this is an unequal space. Given that COVID has sort of expanded that inequality, that unequal space between urban and rural, privileged and marginalized, even within the women's movements, the digital space, and those of us who are working in the digital space can reimagine it to facilitate the bridging of that gap. So we are taking this sort of learning that we got from, say, Kadalur or Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh to the online forum to bridge this gap from both ways. One is we are talking to young people in the margins about what is happening in the mainstream. And we are also telling the educated, privileged, sort of access-oriented young people who are opinion makers in India today about what the realities are in the margins. So this is one way that we have reimagined the right to information, the right to access and knowledge. We are creating content not just for English social media, but we are also sort of optimizing content to regional languages so that more and more young people can access them. And we turn networks created on the ground with young people into sustainable networks through social media. So if we are talking about gender-based violence, we can continue to talk about various kinds of violence. I've had the time to, I think, touch upon a few key important things that we have been as a collective been talking about, working on over the past couple of years. So these are some of the social campaigns that we have run. I'll just quickly go through them, whether it's celebrating, sort of intelligent, brilliant leaders like Dakshayani Amma, or talking about, works of Toni Morrison, information and data. I'm showing you the English versions here. We've made these in 6 languages: English, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Hindi, and Urdu. Oh, 8 languages, yes. So we've made this data posters in 8 languages. We explain laws in pictorial manner so young people and women can understand the laws that are being passed. We talk about electoral politics and women and gender minority participation in electoral politics. As you can see, it is absolutely abysmal. This is data from the 2019 general elections. Karnataka, Haryana, no difference. whether it's Karnataka or Haryana, whether it's the south. And unfortunately, even Kerala and Tamil Nadu had such abysmal rates. It's, no one state in India is better than the other. We are all competing as far as gender-based violence, discrimination, and inequality is concerned. I think that's sort of my time. I don't want to run over. If you guys want to find us, these are our social media handles. We are on Ek Potli Redki or Young People for Politics. Just look us up. And yeah, that's me. If there's anything specific, I would be happy to answer. I just want to conclude with one quick story. Since I spoke about Norati Bai so much, 3 minutes, I want to narrate a story. The root of any gender-based violence movement, any movement against gender-based violence, is obviously feminist. Feminism is the biggest sort of anchor for anything gender-related in the world. And as a young woman born and raised in Chennai and studied in some England, very fancy, I thought of feminism as one thing. And a few years ago, when we were holding a large women's rally in Rajasthan where 10,000 women had gathered, and my mentor Aruna ji was talking on the mic, and she was very angry, and she said, it's been 70 years since independence and nothing much has changed for women in India. What is this? And Norati ji was very quietly sitting there, and she yanked at Aruna ji's sort of pallu, and she said, speak for yourself. A lot has changed for somebody like me. I used to wear a ghungat that was until here. Today, my ghungat is here, which means I have seen progress. My life is progress. So let's not lose hope as far as gender and gender-related or caste-related violence is concerned. If somebody like Norati ji can lead the way, all of us can follow. And I think there is some positivity in every negativity everything negative that's happening. So thank you very much. Jai Bhim, Jai Savitri.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And we are greatly inspired by your talk and by Norti G's personal experience as well. It's just really an inspirational story. I think too many women have too many stories to share. I think this one story is very inspirational, and thank you. And before we move on to the Q&A session, I'd like to summarize the few things that you have highlighted. One thing that's pretty interesting that you have highlighted about the upward mobility, about no violence happens in isolation. It is an intersectionality of everything. It is caste, community, and everything. And especially country like India, where there are so many things that we need to look in. Whereas in Western country, it's just only the ethnicity or the race that they have to fight for. Whereas in country like India, we fight for too many things. Anything that you take, religion, region, caste, community, language, there's so many things. But in spite of it, we have been progressing really well. That's one of the positive moves that we take from. And especially when you're talking about how that we need to create a non-violent community, non-violent culture, very important, that makes a gender inclusiveness. So if we have any questions, that we move on to the Q&A, then we come for the closing remarks. I request the participants to post your questions in the chat box. And there is one question, ma'am. Can you highlight the challenges that are prevalent when it comes to reimagining path towards fair justice system, security, and human rights? I think it's a general question posted. Any speaker can take. And request for the participants, if we can post to the speaker, becomes very appropriate. Now, I think both the speakers, anybody can take on the question.
Is Virgil ma'am here? If she's here and she's willing to take the question, then otherwise I'll take it.
Or we would appreciate both your comments on that, ma'am. You can go ahead,
so
ma'am.
Yes, can you highlight the challenges that are prevalent when it comes to reimagining? As I said, I think the primary challenge itself is that in a country like India, the entire system is rooted in patriarchy and caste. And as human rights workers, the first thing we experience is whatever you think you're fighting in society and you take it to a system, the system is the exact reflection of the society. So if you are talking about, say, for instance, if you're going to a court to deal with a caste ignited gender violence case, say, for instance, there are cases of punishment rape. right? So you go into a courtroom hoping that you will get justice, and the judge seated there, or the magistrate seated there, belongs to the dominant caste and is probably a man. So what sort of justice do you expect in a system that is heavily biased towards the problems that you're already dealing with? So I think the largest challenge for us has been that the system itself is a reflection, or is a piece of the society. So there needs to be an overhauling of the system. And like, for instance, one of the policies that we are pushing for is appointment of teachers, a policy for appointment of teachers and transfer of teachers, wherein we've had so many cases where dominant caste teachers have used terrible slurs, caste slurs and gender slurs against children. So in that sense, the system needs an overhauling. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I would say that faces any human rights work.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Virgil, ma'am, you're here. All right. So we'll move on to the. I have got a question to you, Radhika, ma'am. By looking at the profile, you seem that you have been extensively traveled throughout India, working from northern states and southern states. Is there any difference in terms of experiencing resistance from the native community in terms of against any gender-based violence, difference from north and south?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite analysis. I'm so glad you asked me this question. Having been born and raised in Tamil Nadu, I was not, like, patriarchy in my head is a particular kind of thing. It is somebody, it's usually of a particular kind. So when I went to Rajasthan, I understood that patriarchy is multiple kinds. So what happens? So I will just tell you two examples. The patriarchy in Rajasthan is the kind that will tell you that you are a weaker sex. You need to be protected. That's why they ask you to cover your face. That's why you're not allowed to walk alone. That's why you will not be allowed to, go to a college that is outside of your, town or village. For instance, a bus driver will refuse to drop me in a place where I want to be dropped, in a bus stand that where my house is literally half a kilometer from there. He'll say, no, call the man in your house to come pick you up. And he'll force me to go to a main bus stand, which is 6 kilometers away. He will make the decision for me because I'm a single woman in a bus. Whereas in Tamil Nadu, I've seen patriarchy in a completely different manner. They see me as a threat. They don't see me as needing protection. My voice, my fierceness, my ability to assert myself is a problem. So their first response to me is abuse. Their first response to me is harsh language. The first response is sort of ignoring me or discarding my opinion. So there is patriarchy everywhere, but I have experienced patriarchy in very different ways in all my travels. I think not just patriarchy, any sort of social conditioning is equally bad in the south and north, but just different.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I think Virgil ma'am has just joined. Ma'am, there's another question for you, Virgil ma'am.
She's unable to unmute herself. Oh, okay.
I have unmuted her.
Yeah, now I have unmuted.
Yes. Ma'am, I've just got a question. Since you're working extensively in terms of child rights, I know that Arnodaya has pioneered work in the areas of children parliament. So when you had girl children participation, and when these girl children were part of the children parliament, and when they grew up, what is their stand on protecting themselves from these kind of a violence? When they have been trained about the rights at the very earlier stages, does it had an impact when we grew up from your experience, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. I don't know, the past 27 years. And in this 26, 27 years, nearly 20 years, we have been involved in forming children's sangam, children's collectives, bringing them together, letting them know, become aware of their rights and initiating action on their own, identifying what is the problem in their area and initiating actions on their own. And we do lots of capacity building so that they have the capacity, they have the information, they have the ability to take action.
to express themselves and how to advocate, how to lobby with other officials and government people. So through this process, what I have seen is I really feel happy, that at least to this section of children we were able to bring about the change. And a majority of our members are girls, because we always say that 50% should be girls, and sometimes it is more than 50% also. And leadership aspect also, 50% should be girls, and on rotation, so that boys and girls both get the opportunity. And as I said earlier during my talk also, it's not only working with girls, but we need to work with boys also very much, with the society. So working with the boys, we give them a lot of information on gender stereotyping, on gender abuse, on adolescent issues, understanding themselves. So at this stage, what we see is that if there is any case of abuse against a child, gender discrimination, for example, in the school, if there is no toilet for girls separately, they fight for it. And they identified that issue and they were able to get separate toilets. That's a very simple issue. They had toilets in the ground floor and first floor, but they kept it common for both boys and girls. So these girls are finding it difficult to go there. And they raised this issue during one of the school council meetings, student council meeting, and they said, okay, ground floor is for girls and for boys. The problem was solved. It's easy. But it was running, it was just happening there, because once the student identified that they were educated, they were able to bring about that thing. Yes, like the child marriage. Since we have given them awareness, if they come across any issue of a child getting married, immediately they inform us or they inform child line, and they were able to stop it. And for them, they have the conviction that I will not get married. After the age of, they don't even say 18 years, so that is the legal age for marriage for girls. They say after I'm educated, after I get a job, then I will get married. For boys also like that. So boys respecting the girls, that is very, very essential. It's not only talking to the girls, but boys respecting the girls, how much they recognize their rights, and not only in our children's sangha, but in their family, respecting their mothers, respecting their own siblings. So this has brought about lots of change, and many of our girls are well educated now in good jobs and aspiring to be IAS collectors, and many of them have gone for legal education, law, because they feel that they should become lawyers, not to fight for women's rights and for child rights. So it is work, and I'm really happy with the sharing by Radhika, the Kadalore experience. Wonderful experience, really, And also, I seeing you working with the children, I would like to connect with you.
Definitely.
So it's really interesting to work with. I place my full trust on children, because the adults now we are not able to change the mindset. But if we can change this, they can bring about change in the society. That is what I believe. Just to give an example, once our children group was conducting, they took up every year they take up one issue, and that year it was on child sexual abuse. So they were doing a stage play in the community on child sexual abuse. And one of the members in the community, one male member, questioned the children, because girls are dressing up like this only, they are being abused, they are being raped. If girls are good, if they go decently, then no one will rape. And one of the boys from that group, from a children group, answered it saying, we see children, even 6 months old girls, baby, 1 year old baby being raped. Do you think that they are dressing up in that way, indecent way, that they are provocating the men? So that was the answer given by the boy, who was around 13, 14 years. So that kind of awareness and the ability to come out with the views and opinions collectively is given.
Thank you, ma'am. There is another question. I think that has been addressed to both the speakers. Will increasing the age of marriage for girls progressively, will that be a stand for reimagining their rights for girls? Initially, it was from 16, 18, and 21. Will the increase in the age of a marriage legally, can it have an impact on their access to the rights?
Okay. So, okay, I'll just take it and then maybe. Yes and no. No legislation is completely 100% foolproof when it comes to implementation. Even today, the age on paper and what we see as as sort of a progressively large number of child marriages in India is a dissonance. It's not because we don't have a law. We do have a law that says so and so age is what is appropriate. But anyway, 12-year-old, 13-year-olds are married. And but that law is important, and progressively we must increase the age for marriageable age for women. It must be set on paper that women have to be given the time, the space, and the access to great education, employment, individual development, and only then should they make a choice, an informed decision about their marital life. Having said that, in the ground level, as far as implementation is concerned, I think it's the mindset that matters more than the law.
Yes, it's interesting, but a lot of debate going on in this. Even among the child rights circles, there is a group saying that no, we should not increase the age. It should be, in fact, decreased to. And we had a discussion with our Children's Sangha members on this issue when this legislation came up. So I would like to share with you what we said. One thing first, what we said, when we say 18 years, our parents are the children married at 14, 16. So if they reach 21, at least they will come up to 18 years. No one follows legal procedures. If the children marry, they marry. What the children said is, if it is 21 years, at least the marriage age by the parents may be raised to 16, 18 years. And secondly, they said education important for children, because at Arunoria we always insist on the education aspect. So the children said the girls need to be educated, and for that they have to complete at least that higher secondary and college education. So for that they need time, at least 21 years. And secondly, thirdly, they said the maturity. Only after 18 years we will become mature. Up to 18 we are only children. No, after 18, 19, 21 years only we will mature. So the physical maturity as well as the emotional maturity, and they were also giving examples of children who got married early, how they got into a lot of family problems, and they have been deserted, and health-wise also they were saying for bearing a child, they need to be above 20 years. And also they need to know about themselves, have a job, so that they can take decisions. Otherwise, they're always under the leadership or the dominance of the husband or the in-laws family. To be able to take decisions, they were all unilaterally, all the children said it should be raised to 21 years. That is good for the girls, the age of the girls. And they were also saying, why this discrimination for boys 21 and girls 18? Let it be uniform for everyone, for boys and girls.
I just want to quickly add something to this question. The concept of child marriage, especially, since I've experienced or seen and learned from the grassroots, is never really a decision about marriage. It is a social and cultural decision. And for instance, if you see a poor family that has 4 daughters, organizing weddings for each of the daughters is a very expensive affair. So usually what happens is, when the first daughter attains the age of 18, all the other daughters along with her are married off in one ceremony. And in certain cultures, children are married, not sent to the married home. They are kept in the parents' home because it's a working hand. And it is a transference of that working hand from one family to another family. India not only has dowry system, it also has bride price. So it's a very complicated social and cultural system. And I think the laws don't address these nuances. That's why we tend to fail in implementation.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you, ma'am. So if if you don't have any other questions, I think we can go for the concluding remarks from the speakers.
Yeah.
We don't have any further
So,
questions. So I request,
yeah.
yes, ma'am. Yeah, I request Dr. Virgil, ma'am, to do the concluding remarks from the speaker side.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It has been very good listening to Radhika as well as the questions raised by the participants. I think that's been a good discussion. As both of us have been saying, the societal structure, the culture, the tradition needs to be changed. And we have to be cautious. Especially, I would like to talk about the media. How far we can respond immediately, when gender bias advertisements come or gender bias programs are aired on TV or in the cinema. If we can all raise our voice, we can bring about it. In certain instances, we have thought about that. So how we can all work together collectively to change this system. It's not just talking about men are against us or this kind of issues, but the system needs to change because in this system both men and women have to change. What is in our mindset that needs to be the shift has to come about. If we can work on it, that will be just nothing like that. If each of us get ourselves committed, first the change has to come within us first. Whether we have that kind of mindset, and also when we work with children, with girls and boys, to kind of communicate this message to them. So at the younger age, when it is given to them, at least the next generation will be surely different, and we are really hoping for it. Again, thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We are greatly blessed with a lot of thoughts. That was an experience of 40 years in the field of child rights working for women. Thank you, ma'am. And now we'll move on for the concluding remarks from Ms. Radhika.
I think I want to finally try and help all of us make one critical distinction in our dialogue around gender-based violence. Culture is a double-edged sword. The one edge can cut great impactfully into bad things, and the other edge can cut with a lot of impact into progress as well. So we need to, when we deal with the culture of violence, we need to understand that not all elements are black and white. We can't get rid of everything at one go, nor can we protect and preserve everything at one go. Laws have to be made, especially in a diverse country like India, with the involvement of the stakeholders. So as far as gender-based violence is concerned, the first and the primary sort of goal in reimagining our rights should be to identify ourselves as a separate segment of stakeholders within the policy-making dialogue, policy-making space. We must insist on that space in decision-making. We must continue to fight for leadership within to create systemic change. And we must direct sort of all our focus towards accessing, as now we are reimagining rights, we should move towards actioning and accessing that right. And finally, push for targeted interventions, but not in isolation, not as just gender, but in multiple intersections, as we've spoken about over the past couple of hours now. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, HRF. Thank you for allowing me to place my opinions and my thoughts in this platform.
Thank you so much, Radhika ma'am, for your sharing your extensive experience working throughout India, working with different campaigns and movements. Also, we are greatly honored to have you in our midst. And to conclude the session from both the speakers, one thing is very clear, that gender-based violence is not only violence that happens to women. That's been highlighted by Virgil ma'am. It's not only that domestic violence, the dowry or trafficking or female consent. It's also about when women deserve certain rights, when she doesn't get that, that is also considered as violence. So in that context, gender-based violence is a means of control, enforcing, and not only that, also protecting existing privileges related to the natural resources that particular gender can experience. And as Radhika ma'am highlighted that, that no violence happens in isolation. There is always a transactionality is there. That, two major things that we need to address. One is hierarchy and again the caste. That approach is very much needed. Say for instance, for sometimes, changes in access and control over the resources can create a tension within the family that can result in intimate partner violence to a greater extent. For example, when women or when attempting to enter into an agricultural market, women can experience domestic violence as a partner seek to control finances to maintain the economic dependency on them. So, in addition to all the risk factors that she already facing in the family, even she wants to break that, private sphere and come out to the public sphere and participate that. There are a lot of structural problems that, as a woman that she has to face in order to collectively participate in the private sphere. And as Virgil ma'am was highlighted saying that, even women come outside participate in the public forum, especially about the political rights. It's not about the participation in the political rights, but about women having power in the position that they have. Who has got the power? It's not about the women has participated in the local election and won the seat. It's about who has got the power. For local contact, even the meetings, who has the power to highlight the things, everything. And indeed, when you look at the global agenda, say for SDGs or your 2030 agenda, there are two things that can clearly highlight. One is reducing crime and violence. Parallelly, they also talk about advancing equality and eradicating, discrimination. Both has to go hand in hand. In fact, I would say that, in order the access to the rights and resources will act as a catalyst in reducing gender-based violence. Or I can put it in another way: if you want to increase, if we increase the rights to access to participation or the resources, in a way we are increasing the gender-based violence. So both has to go. So one has to increase and one has to decrease. For instance, about the property rights, land and identity are so important. The land is considered as the most fundamental resources for any living condition. So without the rights to own a land, women have to strive for the economic purposes. Physical insecurity makes them compromise and leaves them vulnerable to violence. It's not only the property rights. Say about the education. If they don't have an access to good education, they turn out to be an unskilled person. And when they are an unskilled person, they don't have an access to good employment. When they don't have a good employment, they don't have any choices to bring in a productive income to the family. Though they contribute so much for the care work, that's not been considered as a productive work. Right? So it contributes. So the right and access to the resources are very much important. And my thoughts on that, having no access to the resources or having very limited access to the resources have endangered women in our society. That's no doubt about it. And having made them fall victim to gender-based violence as well. And look across the globe, you see that majority women try to involve themselves in collecting firewood for fuel, fetching water from miles from home. They have to travel long hours to go to the school. Financially, they have to be dependent on men. So everything in all this process, there is always a component of violence. And access to the rights and employment plays a very active role in reducing gender-based violence. Say, for instance, simple getting an access to employment, getting access to education, or safe drinking water, or safe LPG. So all those will complement, add on value to women, and it also can, in a way, work on reducing violence against women. So I would like to conclude with one of the quotes from an American writer, James Martin. Once said that, to know how justice is administered in a country, one must go to the unprotected and listen to their stories to learn. And not whether the country is just, but whether or not it has got any love for justice or any concept of it. I think this is one of my favorite statements because, people keep saying that we have come a long way. There is no component of violence to them. So when we talk about whether the nation has been really doing justice to people, I think it's very important to go and listen to the stories of unprotected, listen to the stories of women. As the famous statement, the poem says that no, too many women in too many countries have different stories, but they have the component of violence. Some, they have the same language of violence. Sometimes they are forced to speak the language. Sometimes they're expected to speak the language. Sometimes they're comfortable in speaking the language, or sometimes that's the only language that they know. But it could be multiple reasons. So it's very important to increase access to the resources and rights in a way we are reducing gender-based violence. I think I have really enjoyed the discussion having two very, very experiential personal experience working with young girls and children. One is a renowned social worker having 40 years of experience. Another person throughout the nation working involved in different activities and movements. We are so delighted to have Dr. Vajil ma'am for her experience and Ms. Radhika ma'am for her experience. Thank you so much, and I will hand over the session to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Damon. That was wonderful.
Thanks, Hedda.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. First of all, on behalf of HR, Dr. Virgin ma'am from Arunodaya Center and Ms. Radhika Ganesh ma'am from Kanilam for the wonderful speech and sharing the graceful words with all of us. And I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Damon Queen from Madras School of Social Work. And I would like to thank all the participants for joining here. We hope this session would be very useful and informative to all of you. And I would like to thank sign language interpreters as well as translator for today's session. And once again, I would like to thank our co-organizers as well as our team. So before we close the session, I would like to share two announcements with all of you. The first announcement is all the sessions is being uploaded in our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel name is Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. I repeat, Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. So you can watch the session later on in that channel. If any of your friends or colleagues want to watch the session, you can refer our YouTube channel. The link of the channel is posted in the chat box. And one more announcement is we have successfully completed 14 sessions out of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Tomorrow, we have still 2 more to go. We have tomorrow session, and we have the topic of the session is gendering healthcare, and the keynote speaker will be Ms. Archana Shekhar. Tomorrow the session starts at the same timing, 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Thank you once again. Thank you all.